What do you get when you mix 1 part philosophy, 1 part politics, and cut it with a healthy shot of history?
You get the perfect podcast cocktail. Thank you for listening.
Now sit back, open your drinks, and open your minds. This is Six Pack Philosophy. Welcome to Six Pack Philosophy with Mike and John. I'm Anastasia, and this week we are discussing the life of Aristotle and his theories on logic and stuff.
Logic and stuff.
He did a lot of stuff.
He did a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
That's a new school of philosophy, is logic and stuff.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I was going to say logic and shit, but I didn't figure people would want to take that class.
That actually may be an actual school of philosophy.
That's true. That's true. So anyway, before we get started on Aristotle and stuff and logic, what are we drinking, guys?
We are drinking pumpkin nitro.
Nitro pumpkin ale.
From the Wasatch Brewery in... Where was it from?
Salt Lake City, Utah.
Salt Lake City, Utah. From Donnie and Marie Osmond in Salt Lake City, Utah.
The funnest part of a nitro is pouring it. You
Yes.
turn this thing upside down and you just go to town.
Pour hard. Pour hard with the nitro.
Yes. Pour like you mean it is what it says on the can.
Always fun.
All right.
Always
It looks so creamy. I'm really not sure about this beer.
I'm a little nervous. I'm a little nervous.
too.
The can does
it
not
smell?
look like a beer can. It just doesn't.
That's
It
a
has a good smell.
a flavor.
It's a flavor.
That is a flavor.
That is fantastic.
I haven't had the nerve to try it yet.
I haven't either. I picked it out and I haven't had the nerve to try it yet.
Oh Lord!
All right.
It looks disturbing.
It's a flavor. Anyway. So,
Oh, I wish Alex was facing the camera right now.
It's pumpkin. All right.
we'll
We
break
do
that
have lighter
later.
by the refrigerator.
What are we doing?
We're talking about Aristotle.
Okay.
So, I want to start. I want to give a little bit of background on Aristotle and kind of what he came up through and how he developed. Hit a few high points on his history, and then we can kind of talk about his views on observation and natural science, and how that then evolves into logic, what he called rhetoric and dialect. So, quick high level go through the steps here. Sorry, we're all still rearing from this beer.
This quality beer.
But go through the high level. Aristotle comes up really interested in philosophy. Ends up hanging out in his little community with the philosophers of the time. And ends up
Great philosophers of his time.
Great philosophers of his time, all the way to the point that he moves from his home to go join Plato's school. He was actually one of his students. Yeah. Goes through that, ends up finding a lot of agreement with Plato's views. These are views that are later going to evolve and kind of diverge, and he makes his own schools.
Hey, if you're keeping score there, Socrates taught Plato. Plato taught Aristotle.
Yeah.
So you're 2 generations from Socrates.
Yeah. And so he ends up leaving and finding work teaching Alexander the Great.
Personal tutor.
Yeah.
Philip of Macedon had hired him to tutor his son Alexander. Yeah. Where he taught Alexander his theories on what it meant to be a philosopher king.
And ends up, I think, learning a lot from that experience. You get a little bit of a different view whenever you're dealing with royalty than when you're dealing with the philosophers.
Yeah.
Not that they weren't both high-class people at the time, but there's just different cultures there.
I don't know if I'd call the philosophers high-class people, but they were they were high people.
They were revered. And they spoke the high language.
They spoke the high language, and they were revered by parts of society. They were hated by other parts. Socrates was killed for his philosophy.
That's true.
So,
that is true.
Yeah, you got to wonder about that kind of stuff too.
They definitely weren't poor people. Well,
No.
I say that Diogenes.
This one wasn't poor.
Yes, absolutely not. So he goes through, and after he goes through these experiences, he starts branching out and forming his own philosophies. Aristotle had very high reverence for observation, where we see, and this is where he really starts to diverge, where we see from Plato and Socrates this very scrutinous. Oh gosh, I just said the word earlier. This high scrutiny of knowledge, this skepticism is the word I'm looking for. Aristotle kind of breaks from that, to the point that dynamic is still talked about today. If you read Ayn Rand's writings, she's very critical of Socrates and very praising of Aristotle and his view that you can know something, you can observe something, and that your observations and what you collect is the world, and that is where we get our knowledge, and we take that with us, and we can model the world. Sorry, there's still beer stuff going on here. We can model the world and start to get a good understanding for what's going on. He ends up contributing a lot to the world of zoology, of physics,
Anatomy.
Government.
Yeah. By going through and starting to put into words and documentation the stuff that he's been observing, so people can reach out and grab it and just read.
Yeah, I think he takes that Socratic and Platonic idea of questioning everything and comes up with some interesting ideas.
Yeah, he does something they don't. He comes up with answers.
Yeah, which is not what Socrates and Plato weren't looking for answers. They were looking for the right questions.
Yeah.
Well, and I think he was doing a lot more exploration into practical philosophy, whereas they were really more into theoretical philosophy.
I think he took the tools that they established and created a pragmatic version of it.
Yeah, this really starts to become the first divergence of philosophy from itself into science. This is where science really starts to get its foothold, is with Aristotle. Now, all that said, all that was fascinating, all that was things that he was really interested in, but from a societal point of view, something that fascinated him even more was logic and debate. Now, logic and debate had always been there. I mean, when the philosophers gathered together and talked, they were exchanging ideas in a logical fashion and questioning the logic of each other's ideas. But the difference in what Aristotle did is Aristotle started to really look into, he called it an art, but I'm going to say the science of the exchange of ideas, the science of language, the science of what makes something right and what makes something wrong. He goes through and he recognizes that they had these debate squares, and sometimes they were just people exchanging ideas as philosophers, but sometimes these were courts that were going on. And he realizes that he can analyze the logic of some of these statements, and that the most logical and correct statement is not always the one that wins the debate. And this is a fascinating idea to him, that two people can come together for debate, and they can start firing at each other, and the weaker argument can be won by a stronger arguer. And
Rhetoric.
Rhetoric. He develops these two ideas, dialect and rhetoric, and the two ideas are: dialect is the art of forming a logical statement that is true. I can say something like, all grass is green, and that statement, while it makes sense and conveys an idea, it may or may not be true. It needs kind of a logical backing there on why that is or isn't true. And that's where dialect starts to come in. Let's form true statements. But then this other thing was rhetoric. Rhetoric was, how do we then take that truth or that falsehood, possibly, and communicate it in a compelling way to sway the masses? Because if you have the best idea in the world and nobody's buying into it, it's almost a worthless thing.
Yeah.
And he forms this school where he starts, and he writes, I think 6 books it is, where he starts really diving into the science of this, or the art, as he would call it, and trying to teach people this. He views it as really what we might call a martial art. He talks specifically about people who will, why should we look down on somebody who is able to defend themselves with their limbs, but not with their words? Why should we take that person? And he looks at these people who aren't well-spoken, who aren't able to defend themselves with their words, and he doesn't look at them as having a lesser mind. He looks at them as uneducated, and we just need to give them the tools the same way somebody who may not be able to physically defend themselves may go to a martial arts class. You need to go to a debate class, and I can teach you the things you need to know to be persuasive in your words.
Yeah, you're not incapable of building a house just because of who you are. You need the right tools.
Exactly. He goes through and so I guess let's stop there and talk about that. Why do you think it is that we don't value a true statement? Why are we unable to recognize a true statement as people?
I think it probably has a lot to do with the battle between rationality and emotion in our minds. Because so often and there's a specific term for it. When you argue the emotional side of a topic, it doesn't matter. Whenever you argue the emotional side, you can a lot of times sway people. When arguing on the same side of a topic, making strictly logical, factual statements isn't going to actually trigger anybody to change their point of view.
Yeah, I think Aristotle would argue from the ethical side of it that the way you change somebody's mind, you're using your rhetoric, of course, to change their mind, but you don't argue the facts, you argue the ethics of it. Mm-hmm. And by doing that, you win them over. You don't tell them this is true. You need to do this because it's true. You tell them you need to do this because ethically it will benefit you.
Yeah. You guys brought up 2 points that I want to hit on. Really good lead-ins to some of his work. So he identified actually 3 pieces to this that he thought were important. One is the factualness of your argument, and he says that you are at an advantage if you have a factual and true argument. It is much easier for you to win that battle than if you have a false argument, but he doesn't say it's impossible. He just says you have the upper hand. The other thing that he attributes is emotion. He says a man is much more likely to accept an idea in a happy or excited mood than he is in a angry or a depressed mood, and that a good orator needs to be able to control the emotion of his audience. Mm-hmm. The third one he kind of, I felt begrudgingly accepts, is your character. Mm-hmm. He says that while the character of the man speaking should have absolutely no bearing upon the truth of his argument, he says quite often people are drawn into a man of good character. Mm-hmm. And when giving 2 arguments where there's not a clear choice between which one is right and questions are still open, people tend to go toward the man with greater character as the authority on the subject.
They do, but they also tend to go through the person that can provide the most immediacy to them. Mm-hmm. I like his statements on memory. Mm-hmm. When you read about him, which I love the fact that he tries to couch it in science, but it's the most unscientific understanding of memory I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Aristotle believed that your brain was coated in this fluid, and that your memory was an imprint on there, and that if you were highly intelligent, this fluid was moving more, and that's what caused your brain to work, and the fluids would wash away these memories and allow you to understand something that was new. You get the newer idea, while the more ignorant among society's brains didn't have all those fluids, so the imprint would last longer, and you had to go in and touch on this conditioned imprint, the conditioning of them, and I found that to be at least interesting as I was reading on him.
Well, and there's a lot of places where while the science that he develops may not have been correct factually, he was the only one trying to compile these ideas on memory, and it's really an early birth of these ideas.
Well, but I mean, that idea is still in place. We don't talk about washing away the memories, but we do talk about how to appeal to the masses, you've got to appeal to their earliest formative beliefs, and that's how you move them. While the people that are a little more educated, you can appeal with facts. You don't go for the masses with facts. You go for the masses with emotion, and that's something that's been imprinted since you were young.
Yeah.
And I think that's what he saw. I think that's the when he looked around and he saw the way things were happening, and then he tried to explain it, and he explained it with this idea of washing away of memories, and that the less educated weren't able to do that.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny that we talk about these two ideas of rhetoric and dialect, because whenever we talk about great persuaders, I think of political candidates, kind of because it's what I know. But the first thing we see these people develop is like a good slogan. I think of this recent movement with the idea of taxation is theft. Now, we can argue later about the factualness of the argument, and I think there are good arguments to be made on both sides. But isn't that such a beautiful imprint to your memory and your emotion that MAGA is
the same way.
Make America Great Again?
It's something that appealed to a large swath of people. Yeah.
Yeah, and Bernie Sanders, he actually had a couple of those. Talking about the top 1%. I mean, and we see this.
Obama, yes, we can.
Yeah. Yes, we can. What was Hillary's?
I'm with her.
Forward. Yeah. Forward was.
Was that was another one? Yeah.
I guess that wasn't a great one. We had trouble memorizing. But you see them kind of developing these languages and these slogans, and then they try to argue their version of the truth through this language that people have been emotionally tied to within this culture.
Well, I mean, you look at it, you want people to support war, you get them angry.
Yeah.
If you get people angry, they're more likely to support things like war,
absolutely,
things like martial law.
Anger is a great tool.
Oh yeah, so much.
Worked for Hitler. I mean, come on.
Yeah, right.
Get him angry and give him somebody to blame for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He also talks extensively when he's talking about argument about not only the presentation of argument, but the reception, the sorting through, the listening to argument, and how a listener needs to interact with that. It's funny. So much in our society now, we talk about masses and democratic process and juries and these bodies of people deciding on things. But Aristotle actually believed that bodies of people were much less equipped to make these kinds of decisions than individual judges were. He preferred a judge to act on this. Now, he was freely and openly admitted that judges bring their own biases and that needs to be avoided. But he talked about how argument within juries and groups of people so often devolves whenever you're talking to them into each person feeling threatened by the other's, position, that they all start acting in their own utilitarian interests. And that you really have no dialectic foundation for what's going on. Everybody's just like, well, what's the best thing, for the best outcome for me?
What makes me feel good?
Yeah, in this situation. And you kind of get this average of, well, what's going to help the most people in this jury? What do you think about that, of judges being better equipped to kind of serve in these cases?
Well, I think you've got a different situation here. You've got a situation in a time period when a very small part of the population was educated, and your judges came from that, and it kind of makes sense that you want your judges to be educated. I think in a modern society you might have something different. Let's look at that society that they had, because Aristotle talked about, when he looked at government, he talked about judges coming from the highest parts of society. But he also talked about how we needed an aristocratic king, and the king should be advised by a council of nobles, and then below them there should be an assembly of tribes that was elected by the people. That sounds a lot like a president, a senate, and a House of Representatives to me.
Yeah.
The terminology may be different, But are we
But the
doing
structure is
are
very
we doing
similar.
something different? We're really not doing something much different. We essentially do have a noble president. We essentially do have aristocratic advisors.
I would agree with you on our making of our laws, but if you look at interpretations, that's done by mass jury for the most part now, and even
But it's overturned it's overturned often by courts, and the courts are noble. They're
aristocratic, for sure.
So
well, you brought up an interesting point on education, because we have this modern debate now about educating juries on their power, as well as we see all the time. Everybody knows the way to get out of jury duty is to go through and pretend like you know something, and especially if you actually do.
Yeah.
You know, tell them you're a lawyer or a
Make a
history
racist
teacher.
statement.
that's a good
You know,
way to get out of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I mean, you talk about the power of education in this, but we actually kind of shy away from education when we talk about jury selection.
That's true, and that's part of the reason. That's lawyers that do that. But if you talk to people, there's been a pretty loud call, pretty vocal call over the last few years for professionalizing your jury pool. There are people out there that say that the common people shouldn't be serving on jury.
Well,
there
and
should be professional jurors that know the law.
Yeah. Well, and there was something that I was looking at the other day, talking about how jury trials are not actually that common around the world, which wasn't something that I was aware of. And
They're
that,
getting to be not that common here.
yeah. And that they were, in most places, you're in front of a judge or maybe
Usually
a
a panel.
tribunal of judges or something like that. And I kind of like that because, judges have this very specific task. I'm so sorry, Mike, for the beer. But upon election or appointment, the task of a judge is to separate the facts from the appeals to emotion. That's what I was looking for earlier. And all of the fluff that gets thrown in, all of the rhetoric that masks what's true and what isn't.
Now, that's a very Aristotelian idea, though, the idea that the judge should be the educated person that can separate that.
Yeah, Aristotle actually mentions this, and he mentions how they separate things out, and talks a little bit about how you should approach these two different crowds differently when you're speaking to them. How you need to appeal to emotion with a jury, and you don't need to appeal to emotion when you're talking to a judge.
Right.
So he recognized that and kind of threw it into his teachings. He also had some ethical implications. He had some ethical quandaries, should I say, about these teachings and giving this power to the masses and what that meant. But before we talk about kind of the ethics of what we've said here, do we want to talk about the beer?
Yeah, the beer sucks. Okay. Well, now let's go on and talk about Aristotle some more, huh?
Well, we have to rate it.
Okay.
You want to go first, Mike?
Sure.
Nobody's eager about this. I love it.
This is Nitro Pumpkin Ale from the Wasatch Brewery in Donnie and Marie Osmond's backyard. And
I love that all the camera is getting is the back of Alex's head shaking.
Yeah, and this is absolutely god awful. This is, you know what this would be? This tastes like Thanksgiving or Christmas punch. It doesn't taste like beer at all. It is way too sweet. It is way too spicy for me. Honestly, there's nothing I like about this beer, and I'm sure there's an audience for it. That audience is not beer drinkers. That audience probably has drank something incredibly hot right beforehand and burned their taste buds. But it is not me. This is absolutely a dreadful beer. Do not waste your money on this. I am going to torpedo the crap out of this beer. I despise it. I'm going to give it a 0.5. It's terrible.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty fucking bad.
I mean, it is bad, but wow.
So I'm
Hey, you told me to go first, so I did.
I'm I'm glad you got us this beer. Because me and you have had this debate for years now.
Okay, hold on. Before you do that.
Here we go.
Before we do that, I wrote down about 15 minutes ago, I put John's initials and I said, pumpkin, not good without lots of sugar. That's what he's about to say.
That is exactly what I'm about to say.
I knew it.
This pumpkin revolution in October. Pumpkin is not a delicious flavor. You can use some spices on it, and you can make like a stew or a pie and make something a little more meaty. Or what the direction that our fucking society has gone, you can pour a ton of Christmas spices and sugar in it, and people lose their fucking mind because it's pumpkin. Pumpkin is nasty. Pumpkin itself does not taste good, and they try and mask it with this shit.
Nutmeg, cinnamon, ass, whatever this flavor is.
Those flavors are supposed to be accents, not that you take this spicy like cauldron of witchcraft and then add a little bit of pumpkin to it. All three of my sips have been terrible, but for fairness, I'm gonna try another one just to really get it on my palate before I rate this.
This is fantastic.
It's gotten better.
It does smell good.
It's gotten better since I tried it. The spices are not as offensive to my palate. I think I've adjusted to it the same way that a starving Ethiopian adjusts to starvation. It's warming up on me. I think I'm going to give it a little higher rating than you, Mike. I'm going all the way to 0.8.
0.8, okay.
Yeah.
We got a 0.5 and a 0.8.
Okay.
And now we've got Anna, who's about to just give it a 7 or something. Yeah. Watch this.
So, I'm just going to get it out of the way. I'm giving it a 1.
1. Okay. Wow. I think that's fair. I mean...
and the reason is, I think the base beer, the thing that they were making before they...
There's a base beer.
It must be at the bottom.
Well, and I'm getting there.
Still in the can.
The base beer that they had before they decided it was going to be a pumpkin ale was shit.
Yeah, it was very light.
Yeah, I mean, it's like...
I think they made a bad beer and went, fuck it, let's just put some pumpkin in it and see if we can sell it.
Basic people will flock to this.
I don't think they will. I don't think that they will. It has as much flavor, beer-wise, as a Bud Light.
I think they're going to sell a lot of these to 22-year-old girls in Ugg boots. Is what they're going to do.
I don't think they'll like it.
No, but I think they'll sell a bunch to them.
I think they'll sell to a lot of frat guys trying to fuck girls in Ugg boots. That's what's going to happen.
It's the same people that drink the pumpkin spice latte at Starbucks.
I think they will buy... I think a lot of people will buy 1 6-pack of this.
I do too.
Nobody will buy a second. We also have a bottle of wine in the refrigerator if you just...
Oh, you want to...
I don't know, 6 one way, half a dozen the other.
Wine or beer?
But anyway, everybody has abandoned the table looking for something else to drink. To be fair, I have had about half of this. It has not been a pleasant drink. I've really been trying to give it a fair shake. I like nitros, and I do think that you can tell the nitro smooths it out a lot.
I don't know. It's funny you say that because I was thinking to myself while I was drinking this that this was a beer that just didn't need nitro. It just did. It wasn't savable. There was not a purpose for the nitro in this.
I think it would have been harsh and aggressive without the nitro.
Do you?
Yeah.
I think it was offensive with it. So
yeah.
I don't know what's worse, offensive or harsh and aggressive.
I don't know. But with that, I am...
So we're going to put these two over the side so next time Tommy comes over, he can have a beer.
Yeah. So we finally got rid of one of the Texas Hellas yesterday because we had some friends over and subjected one of them to a sip of one. He wouldn't finish it. And so we still have one left, and now we'll have 2 pumpkin nitros until sometime next year when we can get somebody else to try them.
Full disclaimer on this wine. Excuse me. Somebody brought this over to my house. I didn't pick it. I don't know what's in it. It could be terrible too. I have no idea.
It could be, but I bet it's not pumpkin spice terrible.
Yeah.
So,
no, they have good taste in wine. So I don't know if they've ever had it before this, so I don't know. It could be. It's going to be an adventure one way or the other.
I'm glad we drank this because, I don't like seasonal beers usually.
Yeah.
And I think it was important that we get it out there.
Yeah. Well, and kind of here, my thing was, we haven't had a nitro on the show in a while. We don't tend to do a lot of seasonal, kitschy type beers.
Yeah.
Like we'll have, a summer ale or something like that. We'll do, seasonal beers, and we definitely kind of stick more toward lighter beers in the summer and darker beers in the fall and the winter, but we don't normally do anything gimmicky.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to give it a shot. And like I said at the beginning of the show, it had two ways it could go. It was either going to be fucking terrible or it was going to be amazing. And I think it could have been amazing if they had a better base beer.
I think it could have been amazing if they didn't put pumpkin in it and
or nitro
or spices
and
or
had a different
nitro
beer.
and had a different beer and maybe a different brewery made it.
Are you sure 0.5 wasn't low enough or was low enough?
I'm just saying that our friends in Athens at the Athens Brewing Company and our friends at Cedar Creek, they wouldn't have put this shit out.
That is true.
They would not have put this shit out. So
Okay.
To be fair, Utah is Mormon place and they don't usually drink. They're not supposed to drink. So they probably don't know
Especially
a
not
lot
if they
about
have
beer.
this beer.
in all honesty, Donnie and Marie didn't know whether it was good or bad when they tasted it. So
they never tried it.
Yeah. So, all right. So we're talking.
We were talking about Aristotle.
We were talking
at one
about
point.
Aristotle before we butchered this beer.
I do want to make a disclaimer on the wine. So
It's pretty.
It is pretty. Apparently, the winery that made this, either through tradition or cheapness, decided to use real cork instead of synthetic. And it wasn't stored right because the cork crumbled when I pulled it out. So there's a few bits of cork, and
That's okay. It'll give it.
I'm
character.
skeptical already if it's not been stored right what we're
come on.
getting.
It'll be
But
fine.
Well, and it may not have been the company that did it. It may have been the place they bought
yeah.
it from that stored it poorly. So one never knows.
So back to Aristotle. It smells fantastic.
I've got to tell you, while John's pouring that, I have always had a great deal of respect for Aristotle because of his beliefs on what a government should look like, and I don't think he's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when we get this idea of an aristocratic advisors and then a council of the people and all that, I think that system has proven itself to be pretty effective. And while it may not sound familiar to us, when we really look at it, it's our government.
Yeah.
Our government is an Aristotelian government without a doubt. And, I can respect the hell out of that. That somebody in ancient Greece came up with it.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm going to cleanse my palate now. So somebody else talk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I take slight issue with the reverence that people have for Aristotle. Only slight.
I had a cat
think
named Aristotle once.
that's awesome. But I think he was a fantastic philosopher. He was revolutionary, or maybe not revolutionary, but he contributed significantly to the concept of rhetoric and debate and logic and all this stuff. He held a belief. So he was one of the first to do significant study of human biology and anatomy. And he thought through, I believe, his entire life that humans only really had one gender and that women's genitalia was just deformed penises. And that's all it was.
So how did he
That's
think
not
two men
correct.
had babies?
That's not correct.
No, that is not correct, Mike.
Okay. Well,
I
I went to
don't
school a long
recall-
time ago, so I needed to check that.
Yeah. I don't recall. It's been a while since I was
I've
reading
never heard
about.
that.
Yeah. No,
Really?
it
Really?
is totally legit.
That is unusual. That is really weird.
Yeah,
He
I
also
was-
thought that the center of the universe was the core of the Earth,
Mm-hmm.
and that that didn't believe in gravity so much. He thought the reason that things were held to the Earth was because everything was seeking to go home to the center,
Yeah.
and that's what held everything there. That's
Yeah.
his explanation of gravity.
You know, and the thing about
Actually,
it
it's
is,
a pretty observant explanation. If you look
I
at things.
heard an awesome explanation of gravity that maybe this show shouldn't be gone into, but more or less it talked about time dilation and said because, and this is a scientific
that has
argument,
oxidized.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. It's a little sour. It's still much better than that pumpkin bullshit.
Much better. You know what it needs is a little bit of pumpkin flavor. Never mind. Go ahead.
But it said that the attraction of gravity may be due to the fact that because of gravitational time dilation, the bottom of your body when standing on the Earth is aging just a little bit slower, and it's the top's desire to catch up to that's pulling you in.
That's interesting. That's an interesting idea.
So anyway, that's not Aristotle,
Right?
But
No.
so we were about to go into the ethics of all this. So Aristotle kind of had the same disclaimer on all of his teachings that a martial artist might have whenever he teaches self-defense.
Use this responsibly.
Yeah, it really was. He believed that through mastering these techniques, you could push all kinds of lies, and that this should never be used in an offensive manner to push a lie, that you really needed to be responsible in staying true to what you believe, because if you're pushing lies with this, you're doing harm, and you need to use it in a defensive manner against those who would push lies.
You know what I find humorous about this is we talk about how great of a man Aristotle was, but we pointed out that he was the tutor of Alexander the Great and was apparently a really shitty tutor, because all of his ideas about this stuff Alexander ignored. Alexander ignored his idea of how to lead a government. He apparently ignored the idea of use this stuff sparingly, because Alexander lied to his people all the time as he conquered places. He even claimed to be the son of Zeus Amon in order to conquer Egypt. It seems like there was somebody that just ignored everything he was apparently taught.
He either ignored it or took what he wanted from it and left what Aristotle thought was important about it,
Yeah, that's possible too.
So let me ask you, we've talked a lot about ethics and really gotten a lot deeper than Aristotle ever did into ethics. And I believe, I can't confirm this, that Aristotle would have been a lot more of a my mind's going
pragmatic.
blank on the term. No, I think he would have believed that there is a correct ethics, that there is a perfect,
he would have. Yes. He was always seeking the good.
Yes, exactly. Yet, we find modern views of ethics kind of diverging from that, believing that it's a lot more subjective in its ideas. So with the idea of whether it's complete subjectivity or a degree of subjectivity,
I think most of us believe that someone else's ethics are subjective, but our ethics are not.
Well, of course.
Yeah.
Of course. But with that said, does this idea of using debate responsibly still apply in a modern framework of ethics?
I think it should.
Yeah.
I think it should, and I think we at least give lip service to it. But we know that it doesn't, in fact, apply. That we will misuse debate, and we will misuse rhetoric frequently.
Yeah, because nobody thinks they're the evil one.
No,
like nobody thinks what they're like. Nobody thinks, I'm destroying the world.
I wonder if Hitler did.
Well, I don't think he did. I think given a time frame when he saw a really oppressed Germany, he had pride in his country and he wanted to bring it back. And I think his horrible ideas and hatred for various races were genuine, whether or not they were correct. Does that make sense?
It does, and I think you're probably right. I think he genuinely hated people. And saw a scapegoat. Yeah, I think you're probably right.
And I think we today in a modern society, we can argue whether it's the same or not. Genuinely hate Nazis and Hitler.
Yeah.
And have similar attitudes toward them that they had toward the people they oppressed. So have we really found anything better in that?
I would hope that hating Nazis is better than hating somebody because they're Jewish.
Well, I mean,
we're not trying to kill most of us.
Well, but you're hating someone
Nazis.
because of the actions, not because of the status of their birth.
Yeah.
There's a difference.
Okay.
Well, and to be fair, he peddled a lot of propaganda about what the Jews were doing.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
He talked about them eating babies and all kinds of terrible things.
Well, and a lot of times when we hate these Nazis, Nazi parents produce Nazi children, and those children are sharing ideas, and we're hating them too. We're hating people who are born into an idea. And Aristotle would have completely agreed that the mental is equal to the physical, whether you're born with a color of skin or an idea. Now the difference is one can be changed later.
Yeah.
But to hate somebody from day one with an idea they were born into, is that really that much different than a skin color they were born into when not given the opportunity to change it, you know?
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. Yeah.
So,
Man, you're going to make me question a lot of things here. I hate it when you do that.
hey, that's the point of the show.
Damn philosophy. I quit.
No, you don't.
I'm
going to go do Death by Nitro. Pumpkin spice.
Enjoy.
There's better ways to die.
I don't know.
Do it like the Chinese, just eat a bunch of salt. It'd be better.
There's like 3 full glasses in there that nobody would drink. So.
No, they wouldn't.
That's really the high level view on Aristotle that I had. I know that you guys have some ideas and some stuff you may or may not want to bring into the show. And we can discuss this. So
I'm just curious as to you did more of the reading on it. I studied Aristotle years and years ago, and I teach the basics of him in high school classes. But largely what I teach is his political philosophy, and I've kind of already addressed that. My question for you is: after reading on this, John, do you have a positive view on Aristotelian philosophy, or do you feel like it's misguided us?
I have a really positive view. Yes, I have a positive view on Aristotelian philosophy. I think it missed the mark on a few places.
Yeah.
But I think it was a stepping stone. I think we have to take it in its time. One thing I really loved about it that I kind of incorporate into a lot of my views, both scientifically and philosophically, he talked about something well ahead of his time. Now, not in a mathematical sense, but in a general sense. He talked about probabilistic natures versus deterministic. And it's funny when he goes through and starts talking about what I'm using the word philosophy, but he would have used a teaching or a prescription on debate should be. He talks about individual situations and how the debate you use in front of a given person. He mentions Plato quite a few times in it. The debate you use on Plato may be different than the debate you use, and he mentioned some other Greek person, I don't remember their name. He said, but we're not interested in the individual in the individual pieces that we use for a specific person, because the variety is so infinite that you could never develop a full theory on it. We're looking at the average, the highest probability of affecting masses. And he even talks about in his teachings how this argument is more probabilistic to persuade people. Now, he doesn't go into like 70% of the time. That wasn't developed at the time. But he said this is more probabilistic, but there is no deterministic way that this will work. And just the way that he starts talking about probability, I think was really beautiful in advance for what he was working with at the time.
Well, what do you think about his? I don't know if you even got into it when you were there, but he was very much a Hellenistic, Greek-centered philosopher. Mm-hmm. And as Alexander the Great's tutor, he kind of taught him that Hellenization and all things Greek were better than all things barbarian. And I'm just using barbarian in the traditional, not non-Greek.
Right.
Therefore, he told Alexander that you have no responsibility to the non-Greek people that you conquer. They are just tools to spread the Hellenization of the world. Mm-hmm. You do not have a responsibility to protect the other. You have a responsibility to protect this superior system. What do you think of that?
I didn't see much of that when I was looking into it, but one thing that I admire about Aristotle that I did find is he was willing to change his view as he went.
And he did many times.
And the Aristotle that taught Alexander the Great, and the Aristotle that went to Plato's Academy, and the Aristotle that later starts to talk about the dialect and the rhetoric are three different Aristotles. Absolutely. That said, I have very torn views on that. Ethically, I've come to the place that whenever you talk about a deliberative body, I want to see a very utilitarian, deliberative body that is working for their own good, and hopefully in a large group of people all working for their own good. They're working for the good of society, kind of the invisible hand theory of marketplace, but put toward deliberative bodies. But for the administrators of those bodies, whether you're talking about the president, whether you're talking about a cop, or whoever the administrators may be, I want a very I've forgotten the word. Not utilitarian, but deontological
The one.
application of what that deliberative body came to, right? I want them to follow the rules that deliberative body came to. Now, there's going to be exceptions, and there's times when I want the body to be a little more deontological. It's a sliding scale, but that's where I want to see my kind of tendencies to be, right? So with that said, whenever he looks at Alexander the Great and says, your only concern is with your people, everything else is kind of a tool, I look at that and I say, you know what? As a person, I kind of think that's a little unethical to kind of steamroll over other people to get there. But if that is the will of the people he is serving, isn't he serving them
the question
correctly?
Is, are you supposed to serve all of the people, or are you supposed to serve your people?
Are you supposed to serve humanity or your people?
Yeah.
And I find myself very torn on that. And the place that I come to with American ideas is when I look at our Constitution and a lot of our founding doctrines, it refers to all men. It doesn't refer to American men.
Except it says, we the people of the United States.
Believe
Yeah.
all men are created equal and are endowed with unalienable rights.
Yeah.
Okay, so it says that all men have these rights. And when I look at that, I say, now that's a constitution, rights that I can believe in, that all men have them, and we need to respect them. But outside of violating those rights, we need to be working toward the good of our people. We don't need to violate the rights of all men, of other men, for our own good, but outside of violating those rights, we need to, and that's.
But if the net good is larger than the evil that you commit to do it, Aristotle would say that was okay.
Well, then you got to ask yourself, what's in that good? I mean, does killing 3, and I'm going to extremes here, but killing 3 of another country's people to save the life of one of your people, does the net mean, well, it's 3 people versus 1, or does the net mean my people are more important, so it's worth killing those 3?
Yeah.
You know, and there's a real value question there.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. What was the question?
John
talked for a very long time.
I was just kind of curious as to what your opinion was on Aristotle after hearing all this.
So I kind of gave him a hard time on the anatomy stuff, and you kind of poked fun at some of his thoughts on memory. And he was definitely way off base on a lot of stuff. But I think that he was doing something far different than a lot of people were at the time. And I really appreciate the groundwork that he laid.
I've got to wonder, a mind like that came up with these things in the Hellenistic world, where would that mind be today if he had the knowledge that we have? If he was working on the backs of the giants that came before him now, where would he go?
I often wonder if great minds like that are generally great and dropped into any time period they would do great things, or are the right minds for the time?
Yeah.
If you dropped him in modern society, would his mind just not come up with anything great because the things he would be thinking about have already been solved by people before him? Or, and maybe there are minds then that would have come up with great things now, but the foundation they needed for what they were thinking about wasn't there. Or is it just that he had a generally great mind, and wherever you put him, he was going to do great things?
Yeah, I tend to... I'm a great man historian. I'd be a great man person here too. I tend to think that if he had access to everything we had, imagine Aristotle with the access to the internet.
But aren't those both great men arguments?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. As far as the ethics, though, of his teachings with Alexander, I really do, looking more on like a global scale, I kind of see where he was coming from. I think we've come a long way since then, and it wouldn't be ethical now.
Well, I look at the world and I go, as bad as some of the things that happened were, thank God the Hellenic idea is the idea that spread. The idea of democracy and republicanism is the idea that spread out of there. Now, sometimes it spread at the tip of a sword, but I think the net good has been there over a period of time.
Yeah.
And I wonder, without the sword, would it have spread at all?
Yeah.
Or would it have just been some little experiment that died on these little islands in Greece?
Right. Right.
So I don't know. Interesting guy. Thank you for bringing this to us, John.
So, anything else that we have on Aristotle or logic? Or
I don't, but
here?
I think John probably ought to tell us how you could support the show.
Oh, I think that'd be a good idea.
Absolutely. So if you like what we're doing here and you want to hear more of it, you can actually hear more directly by going to our Patreon, patreon.com/sixpackphilosophy. And for $5 a month, we'll give you access to our back catalog. Now, I'm going to give a little warning here. This is something we've actually already started pushing to our current Patreons. We keep 2 years right now. We keep 2 years on active and put everything on backlog. Season 2 is about to go on backlog. After Season 2 goes on backlog, we're not going to backlog any more episodes. Season 2 will be behind a paywall. Season 1 will be behind a paywall. Everything else will stay open. And we are transitioning. We're transitioning a few ways. We're transitioning to YouTube for a little more video content. In fact, this episode right now, you can get it on YouTube, and you can see our smiling faces or our terrible pumpkin spice faces as we record this. And we are going to start transitioning the rewards that the people who are paying are getting to more content. They're going to be getting a little more of the show than you will be getting.
Yeah.
So if you want to get access to that, you can go to our Patreon. Our koozie club's staying the same. For $1 a month, we will send you our annual koozie, and we have some ideas.
Branding.
We are.
Kind of.
And we're getting a new logo. I think we have something really close to what we're going to do. We're actually going to finalize that tonight. So
we're going through a little bit of evolution over here on the show.
Absolutely.
Looking for a mascot.
So if you get in now, you'll get our old koozie, including our misprint. After January 1st, those are going in the trash. Those are no good anymore. And we are getting new koozies.
Yep.
And we'll send out the new koozies to all of our patrons. So if you want that koozie, you need to get it now. So $1 a month, nothing's changing there. $5 a month. Right now, you'll get the back catalog, and you'll continue to get that, and you'll get the Koozie Club. And we're working on some packages for distributing the other content. And then at $25 a month, we have a book club. I haven't talked to the team about this. We may be closing those out, keeping the people who are in there, sending them books, but closing those out at the end of the year and putting other stuff in there. So if you have been thinking about getting the book club, because we'll still send the books out as long as they're doing it. Get in there now.
Philosophy, beer, history, and politics.
It's a great deal.
Or all
it really
of them.
is a great deal.
Yeah. And if that's not for you, we'll be looking at other stuff, maybe putting people's names, special thank yous in there in the show for people. So look for other levels coming up at the end of the year. But if you
Pictures of Mike's ass.
Pictures of my ass. If you want to see my ass, just send some money. And it sounds like prostitution, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
But if you want to get on the old scale that we have still available through December 31st, get in now. Now is the time to do it.
We will honor it in the next year.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. So we've enjoyed this episode, or I have. I don't know about these guys.
Enjoyed the episode much more than the beer.
Yes.
That's not hard.
No.
So anyway, we hope you guys have enjoyed it too. Be sure to like, share, heart, subscribe, all of the different things on all of the different places, social, podcast platforms, wherever you're at. Thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you've enjoyed it too, and we will see you guys next week. Cheers.
Cheers.
Nope.
That sounds so much better. So much better.
Six-pack philosophy can be used to treat closed-mindedness, straight ticket voting, and faulty reasoning. Side effects of six-pack philosophy may include questioning the status quo, thinking for oneself, and erectile dysfunction. Ask your bartender if six-pack philosophy is right for you. And as always, keep on drinking and thinking. This has been Six-Pack Philosophy.